Hey guys, it's Bonnie from Dwelling Logs. So we have wrapped up our year actually as of yesterday, and specifically we've wrapped up our term that I planned out to do the Age of Pirates along with the Age of Enlightenment because those are crossovers. And so today I would like to share with you guys the resources that I would recommend or not recommend that we experienced during this term, the stuff that we enjoyed. So if this is a topic that might be fun for you or that you think your kids would enjoy, then stick around. And as I put all of our material away in my bookshelves and in storage, I will share it with you guys. So I'm going to be hopping back and forth with things. I should start off though with talking a little bit about the Age of Enlightenment. Okay, so the Golden Age of Pirates was said to be set between I think it was 1650 and 1730. Sorry if you can hear my husband's quad, I can hear it. And then the Age of Enlightenment was the 17th and 18th centuries, mostly full 18th century, and then maybe starting around the mid 1600s within the 17th century. So they were perfect topics to cross over, and I'm so glad we did it together. Age of Enlightenment though is huge, so I wanted to speak to that because we could honestly have stuck with Age of Enlightenment for the whole year. It's an era that we were gonna keep coming back to. So much stuff happened. There's huge names and biography studies that you can do. It's Voltaire, Benjamin Franklin, Boyle. There's so many big names that you learn all throughout school, not just for science, but philosophy. Well, I guess that's a science as well. But huge topics within the Age of Enlightenment. So it's really interesting and a little difficult to narrow down how you're going to go at it. We did more of an introductory style, was what is the Age of Enlightenment? When did it happen? We did Middle Ages before this, so it was really kind of cool to go from understanding the fall of Rome happened, and then Middle Ages comes along, and then a couple hundred years later, then the Age of Enlightenment starts. So we kind of skipped a little bit there. So we didn't do the Renaissance, but it would go Middle Ages, Renaissance, and then Age of Enlightenment for Western history. So we did try to pull in a few avenues to see what was going on globally, but we mostly focused on Western history. So it was really fun. I highly recommend it. The other thing about the Age of Enlightenment that was the spiritual aspects of it. So we're a believing family. I am a Jesus lover, farmer's wife. Well, I always say I'm a Jesus lover, farmer's wife, second generation homeschool mom. I'm a born again Christian. And so this era took a really special place in our conversation based on faith, because the Middle Ages was such a learning time. When we did Middle Ages this winter, it was this learning time of faith, and there were ups and downs and big mistakes that were made even in the name of faith. So those were really deep and powerful conversations as well. But then you get into the Age of Enlightenment, and it's really when science was allowed to trump religion, or there was that sort of beginning of that. And so there was a lot of conversation around, power of the church and, the birth of evolution theory and all of that kind of thing. And really a lot of people that were, kind of an era that went from just looking at church and God and the Bible and Western history as the author of the world, to looking at science. And for some of them, that meant combining them and saying, look, didn't God make a beautiful, orderly world? But for some, of course, it didn't mean that anymore. It meant a breaking away from the faith. And so those were the deep spiritual, religious kind of conversations that went around the table during the Age of Enlightenment, because it was really exciting. Some of it was heartbreaking. But anyway, so that's something a very key element that was in our home while learning about the Age of Enlightenment. We kept talking about the triumphs and the tragedy, just with what was going on in terms of faith versus science, and then also trying to really notice when it was faith versus science and faith equal science, when those work together. So that was just something interesting that I thought that I would mention. But yes, it was definitely historically a time when people kind of went with a lot of blind faith. That's just how they were raised. This is what they believe, the earth is flat, to the earth is round, to wow, we're finding out all this stuff. It was such an exciting time in history. It was actually such an exciting topic. And if you're a believing family like us, then you're going to have a huge array of conversation that's not just around the science part and the exciting science stuff. So that was really unique about this topic. And I think too, as sort of an introduction to, like, now that we're done and putting this away, something else that's really important to know about the Age of Enlightenment, and I'm not calling myself a scholar or like all that knowledgeable, but we did spend 12 weeks thinking and pondering and learning, is that the Age of Enlightenment really has led to today's very scientific mind, which is very cool in a lot of ways. But I think today what we're seeing is a lack of knowing that there is a spiritual void when we take the spiritual out. And so the Age of Enlightenment, suppose one of the tragedies too is that really was the start of what propelled the elimination of faith in one's life. And as far as like what you could explain, or how would I word that? I'm not sure if I can articulate it because it's a really big thing. But if I can be vulnerable and just speak however I can, I feel that we're in a time where everything is very science-based, and it's really cool, the science that we know. But I think that this generation and the last many generations have been missing the faith element. We're realizing, oh, wait a second, we need faith in our lives. There's a spiritual aspect to humanity, and that's not been focused on. Okay, so let's talk about the resources that we used. First of all, I'm not going to go through every single resource we used if it doesn't have to do with the Age of Enlightenment. If you want to know more about what we've been doing the last 12 weeks, I've actually been vlogging it because it's our first 12 weeks going deeper into the Charlotte Mason principles and habits. So I will share with you guys my feast planner. I did not have this at the beginning of our Age of Enlightenment term, but this is what I needed, and basically I made this so that I could plan our terms. What the feast planner has, this is free on our website, I will leave the link below. It has a place for you to write down themes and interests that your family has, and I have it by topic, interest, era, and geography, so that when you're writing this stuff down, you can coordinate, you can see where there's crossover, so that if you're like me and you like that unit study style approach or topical approach, that will help your planning for your interests. Also, individual goals for your kids. I'm big on family style, but every once in a while there are some individual goals that we want to hit. So there's some brainstorming pages there. This is seasonal stuff, what's in season, like ecology wise. It was really cool because right now it's spring and there's so much nature and spring resources that I want to use, but that fit out in really nice when we were learning about Carl Linnaeus, who he was the one who organized all of our creatures and bugs and stuff into like a naming system. So that was really good. And then term table, I go through kind of how to create a term table. Basically, you take all your resources, decide how long your term is going to be. I recommend 10 weeks. I think 12 weeks was a little long for us, but the shorter your term is, the more reading you have to kind of pack into your weeks in order to get through the books that you want to read too. So keep that in mind. But there's a place to organize that. There's a place to make your routine and your schedule, or timetable. So there's that, and there's weekly table pages, and there's a note pages at the end. So get this free on my site. While you're planning this, jot down the things, the resources that you see today that you think are really interesting and you guys might like to use, and have fun planning your term. Okay, let me start putting some of the stuff away and show you what we used. Okay, read alouds. These two books, these are classics. This is Carry On Mr. I'm saying Bowditch. My son says Bowditch. I'm like, I think it's Bowditch. Anyways, and this one is Robinson Crusoe. We actually got Robinson Crusoe for free with our Audible subscription too. So these are both classics that really fit with the theme. Again, we were kind of trying to stick with pirate theme or Age of Enlightenment theme, which includes the American Revolution as well. So Carry On Mr. Bowditch or Bowditch. He's American Revolution, and Robinson Crusoe, of course, he does lots of like pirating I shouldn't say pirating, but sailing. He was captured by pirates. So Robinson Crusoe was supposed to be around the 1650s, and this one was like 1760s, 1770s anyways. So 17th century, 18th century stories. I did not read this one with my kids. This one my son read on his own. It does have some tragedy, but it is a happy ending in his story. But yeah, my son said he really had some hardship to go through, and also some sailing in this one too. So you can even see on the cover. And then this one I did read with my kids, Robinson's adventures, famous adventures, getting stuck on an island for over 20 years and trying to make a go of it. And I won't spoil the ending, but I really like the ending too. A couple of other books that I had talked about, I actually shared that we were going to do this one as a read aloud, Pirate's Passage by William Gilkerson. My kids just lost interest. I felt like it was pulling teeth to read it to them. However, this is really well reviewed on Amazon. So I don't know. That's how far we got. I can't give you a book review, but we dropped this one. I had this one out that we never even got to, but this one was in my husband's books from when he was a kid. It's Pirate's Point, Peril at Pirate's Point by Lee Roddy. I kind of think that this might be a Christian author. It's focused on the family publishing. I picked it up because it was pirate themed, but we did not get to it. The other book that we had is Pirates Illustrated. This is an informational book. This was not just a read aloud. This is another one I wanted to show you guys that we dropped. A couple of things. We dropped it because it was an overload of information. Lots of details. Very detailed, like pirate skirmishes with the Spanish, chronologically, names, dates, places. So if you had like a pirate fanatic in your house, this might be a great book. It was too much reading with too many details to keep us stimulated, but very cool for a pirate fan. I will say though, it is not written for children. So red flag if you are concerned, because I did have to skip some sections. It talks about how pirates treated women and themselves, and there is sexual content in here, not in a, like it was written in a professional way, but it is in here. So just so you are aware that I would put this with a warning or disclaimer out there. We did end up getting about a quarter of the way through, and then I picked pieces and passages to use and read from there, and then we ended up dropping it all together because we were quite exhausted of pirates by about the halfway mark. I think most of our pirate resources we had finished and wrapped up around the 5-week mark in our 12-week term, and that was long enough. So Age of Enlightenment has lots of topics, but when we started, we had a lot of pirate stuff, and I think that would have been really, in hindsight, I wish we would have focused on the golden age of pirates for a shorter time in our term, maybe a quarter of our term, a third at the most, and then moved on from there. Boy, it seems that I have misplaced or possibly recycled something already, so I'll put it up on the screen. So Monique at Wonderhouse Creative, she creates some of our very favorite, she calls them deep dives or unit studies. She usually gears them for about a middle school level, but I have no problem reading them to my kids. I think that they're great. She's one of my son's very favorite creators for resources. So we did her Age of Pirates study, which was a unit style study, if I could say that right. And it had activities, lots of information. We did have to look up a few things because a lot of the information or the verbiage for pirates, we didn't actually know what it was. But there's grammar and language arts prompts in there. There's art stuff in there. Like her studies are very well rounded, very hands-on if you want, but not complicated hands-on. You're not going to need to go to the dollar store for a whole bunch of stuff. So a lot of her things are paper or activity based on research and things like that. So highly recommend her stuff. And so we did her pirate study, and we actually wrapped it up early because my kids loved it so much. They would often be like, can we do another one? Can we do some more? Okay, so for composers, we started out with Henry Purcell because he was in the right era. And I will be honest, I am not a Henry Purcell fan. It did not take long before I was like, I don't know if I want to listen to another one. That sounds so bad. I'm so sorry if you're a fan, if anyone out there is a fan. So we switched to Mozart, which everybody loves, come on. So we listen to Mozart for the rest of the time. So that is a switch up that we made. For Age of Enlightenment books, so I really like this one, The Age of Enlightenment, A Captivating Guide to the Age of Reason, including the lives of Isaac Newton, Francis Bacon, John Locke, and Mary Somerville. This is a book mostly of biographies, not too short. I would say if you want in-depth biographies, this is not the book for you. And if you're looking for a non-biography, just information about the era, this is also not the book. However, if you want a compilation of big names within the Age of Enlightenment to kind of get an idea of the people that were there and what was going on, I thought this was really great. There's 26 chapters, and it's mostly, I was just gonna try to find some non-names. So it's mostly biographies, but like chapter 1 is the Republic of Letters, explaining how the scientific community started communicating with each other and writing in Latin and stuff like that, so that they could grow as a community and share their knowledge. They also include things like explaining the Royal Society of London. I'm sure that they have the Boston Tea Party and the American Revolution in here too. So it wasn't 100% biography, but it's mostly short biographies in here. So I enjoyed going through this with the kids. It is not, I wouldn't call it living book style though, as far as like if you're coming at it from a Charlotte Mason perspective. It's pretty textbook-like. It's not from the person's point of view. It's not like story form kind of thing. Okay, the other book we pulled from, we didn't read this cover to cover, but we pulled from was The History of Science in the 18th Century. This is actually one I got for $1 or something like that at a library sale. And this one was a really interesting book, just going through the science and the people. So I thought it had a good mix of not just the scientists, but what they actually did, as well as at the back, they have a timeline list chronologically through the Age of Enlightenment that was really helpful to go through and recap at the end, just with like chronologically what was going on, both science and scientists. And so I appreciated that. This is definitely not from a Christian perspective. I didn't feel that it was written with a lot of admiration for the scientists who were using science to prove the existence of God. So I don't know. So as far as like Christian perspective, the information was well worth it, but just know that it's not written from a Christian perspective. This one I wasn't necessarily either, but I definitely felt like this was super neutral. Like it was fine writing in an almost admiring way. If there was a scientist who really had a lot of devotion to their faith, it wasn't afraid to talk about that in this book. Whereas this one, it just felt different. Anyways, the other book that we read part of, like this book was called Before the World Was Ready. It's very cutely done. It's written for kids. It's got really cute illustrations, very captivatingly written, I would say, both with the pictures and the stories. But this one, what were my thoughts? Okay, it has more than just scientists from the Age of Enlightenment, so we didn't read them all, but it's stories of daring genius science. This again, though, was not written for Christian perspective. So when you're dealing with science, there are families who are like, we only want to teach science from a Christian perspective, and then there are other families who would like to have whatever perspective, but then build conversations around that when necessary. We're a little bit more that way, depending. Sometimes I read something and I'm like, you know what, I just don't like the perspective this is being written from, and we just drop it. So we did pick and choose from this book, and we enjoyed what we read from it. So I haven't read it from cover to cover yet, but it was recommended to me by another homeschool mom, and I thought it was very well done. Okay. And that's about it for what we had included that was specific to the Age of Pirates or Age of Enlightenment, besides, you know, movies, smaller maybe storybooks in the library, things that we maybe have given back already. It was a really, really fun thing. We have like Playmobil, that's pirate Playmobil, so there was a lot of imaginative play and stuff like that. My son is in the process right now of converting his kayak to like a sail kayak because he'd really like to sail. I think that part of that might have been inspired by some of our ship learning. So yeah, it was really fun. We could have chosen a poet from the Age of Enlightenment, which we didn't. We ended up doing Longfellow, who's 19th century, so he's a little bit later, but not much later. So I was like, well, good enough. I kind of wanted to spend time with Longfellow poetry for a large chunk of time, perhaps even a full year. Life, I'm out in the garden editing and planting beets at the same time, and I just realized I forgot to mention that we were watching a video course from, oh, it's like an addition to our Prime membership. It's the Great Life courses or something like that. It was on pirates. And we were watching it until, again, it wasn't a course made for kids, and there was some content that was a little bit mature for them. So we didn't follow through with it, but I thought that was an interesting addition. I think if I had to redo it, I probably would we try to do it on Fridays so we could have just a little bit, we have like a lighter Friday. We tried to make Fridays fun, so I thought that would be a great day for a video course. But if I had a do-over, I probably would just select some YouTube videos with pirate information and history and stuff like that. So I can't say I would recommend the course for kids. But again, if you got a pirate fanatic and you want to kind of censor as you go, that's cool beans too. Please make sure, I want to add in too, if you have favorite pirate or Age of Enlightenment era resources, please drop them in the comments, because it would be so helpful as us mamas are planning topically to know what our favorite things are. So I hope that's kind of helpful to kind of know our experience, what we used, what we liked, what we didn't like, how we kind of came at it perspective-wise. We will definitely visit this era again. I'm really excited for that. I think it's the backbone of a lot, and I'm really glad that we did it now, and we'll do it again, because I think it's helpful to understand different time periods in bigger, broad, general chunks as you learn and read a lot of classics and different things. So I'm really looking forward to that. So now that Middle Ages, and we've done Ancients before, but that was already a couple of years ago. We might have to go back to that. But Middle Ages and Ancients, and we would love to go back into the Renaissance. We did a little bit of Renaissance with some of our invention studies in years past. But that would be really fun. We did a lot of Industrial Revolution stuff in the past a few times. So putting periods like that together, I think, to give kids kind of a scope for general timeline. Of course, I'm talking Western history. We are trying to be more intentional about doing more global history too. But as far as certain names that are familiar, especially to where we live and stuff, we usually use the Western history as more of our spine, and looking at what's going around around the world is something that we kind of add on as an extra thing. I really liked when we did Middle Ages. I know this isn't a Middle Ages video, but I really liked when we did the Middle Ages. We actually did a unit study by Gather on Homeschool, and they had like a little blurb about what was going on in the rest of the world, because I think that there is a lot of history to learn around the world, and it's important too to kind of figure out where those fit in line with what we already know and can picture in our minds. So timeline is something that for me needs to be visual, that like I at least need to be able to see it in my imagination. So I'm really excited to do studies like this with my kids and try to really get them to not only just build those timelines, but use those timelines as we keep studying year after year. And as we get information, we can kind of sort it out chronologically too, or whatever. Up and coming, I would love to show you or talk at least about what I really like to do in the fall. I have 2 terms. I'd really like to get into geology again. We did that last year, but I want to do geology again with the addition of dinosaurs. And then what was the next one? I was thinking maybe it was ancients. I think I want ancient civilizations might be part of that, specifically Rome and Greece, because we are doing Plutarch. There was something else. I will have to share it in a future video, but I'm super happy to have that feast planner. Where is it? Right here. Because this is gonna be so helpful. Now that I have this made, I'm so happy, because you should have seen the scraps of paper that I had all over the place when I was planning our first and previous term with the Age of Enlightenment. So this is gonna be great to start planning our next year's terms. So go grab your free copy if you haven't already, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.